Greetings, it's a Timeshare Traveler. Today is episode 306. Owning a deed versus a collection. I have both of them. I can talk, I've had it at multiple companies, both. So anyway, it's really about owning one location versus owning multiple locations. So first thing I'll talk about, what is a timeshare collection? The second one is why timeshare companies like collections. Not necessarily bad for the buyer, but I can tell you why timeshares like them. And then I'll talk about what a deeded timeshare is. And then lastly, I'll talk about the specific experiences I have of owning both and how it's worked out for me. Without that, and then at the end, I'll tell you a little bit about my channel. Let's now talk about what a timeshare collection is. A timeshare collection is, instead of buying a deed to a specific property, you're buying a set of deeds for a bunch of locations. So, and the timeshare companies like selling that to you because it shows you have access to more locations. You get priority across all of those locations that are part of the collection, and then if you want to use the points outside of that collection, then there's usually a lesser booking window. That's in some cases when there are multiple collections. In the case of now, the way Marriott Vacation Club is and the way Worldmark is, all the properties are in the there's only one collection. And there are deeds underneath with the point values, but you're buying into that group. One thing's not clear to me is if you can oversell, like on a overbooking of a flight of the total number of points. I don't think you can, but I'm also not sure that it's regulated that closely, and I don't know how that the timeshare companies are held accountable. They often sell collection, so that gives you the perception of priority. I'll talk about it in the next slide. It actually creates some of the problems we have with shortages at certain locations and not at others. My experience has been that the cost of the maintenance for the collections is greater than the cost of the maintenance because you get to choose your site and choose the one that's got the maintenance fees that you like, and also choose the one that's your priority. So that my experience is they've ratcheted up the maintenance rather than it's more than the maintenance across all of that. This is my impressions of why timeshare companies like collections. Not all the locations sell fast. So when I was buying deeds, I'd often find myself, it's like, here's one of these, there's one of these, and they'd be at different locations. And obviously, like, deeds in Hawaii were often less likely to be found. And usually they were a mishmash of every other year or something like that. So it's usually, they like it because the property in the Smoky Mountains that might be more difficult to sell, and I'm not picking on the Smoky Mountains, but it's probably more difficult to sell that one than the deed in Hawaii. And you probably have to sell the deed in the Smoky Mountains for less than you would sell it for the deed in Hawaii. But in the case of part of a collection, it's all sold as one thing, so they only have to sell one thing and they don't have to worry about managing the inventory. So that's the benefit that the timeshare companies get. You can, again, just sell all of the points at the same price, and they don't have to manage the sale of individual deeds, and especially slow moving deeds. There were always specials when I was looking at deeds at certain locations that were they had a lot of inventory that was back on the books, and having it on the books means there are no customers paying the maintenance. They're paying the maintenance for those deeds. So it was really an incentive. So you'd see a lot. You could pretty much tell what the low usage locations were. Those were the ones that had the most deeds and that were typically on sale. Here's the other thing is collections create shortages. The high demand areas are now lumped in together. So now instead of just having enough people that have access to those deeds at that property that own at that property, you now have people across the whole collection that have access. That's why Hawaii locations are often more difficult to book, because those are the high priority locations compared to other areas that are less. Maybe it's in the middle of winter in Wisconsin, but that person has points that can use them in summer in Hawaii for the same that with everybody else that can use it. So you now have I think it creates a level of shortages for a high high trafficked areas. Um, the illusioners still have their maintenance covered, so that's an advantage. Since they sold everything as a big bucket, they've got their maintenance covered across all of the locations. So it really makes it easier for the timeshare companies. And in theory, we have access, we have priority access, but it really creates that shortages. I see it, I can see why the timeshare companies are. It does create problems for owners because you're now competing for those high demand areas. And timeshare companies control the price of collections. Not that they also control the price of deeds. It's not that they don't, because it's all supply and demand. But because they can control the maintenance and set the maintenance price and the price of collections, if you convert a deed to a collection, you usually get a price discount because they want to not have to manage that inventory. So bringing that inventory into a collection where they can sell it to multiple people, have access to it, is a plus for them. And in fact, I did have that happen with me. And my experience has been, at least with Hilton, where it's side by side, the collection is usually more expensive per point, and usually you can get some specials on the deeded side, and compared to the underlying deeds, maintenance is higher too. So when I look at my total cost per point for maintenance on the deeded side versus the collection side, I have a much lower price point on the deeded side. Now let's talk about what a deeded timeshare is. This means a deeded timeshare means you own a specific timeshare. Usually they don't have the weeks anymore. It's usually just tied to the timeshare, and allows you to buy where the maintenance is lower, which is what I've done. I've maximized my costs on the maintenance on Hilton Grand Vacation, and what that is, you have to look at what the secondary booking windows are, and does that affect you with the locations. And so far in Hilton Grand Vacations, using the points at secondary locations has not been a priority problem. It can get a little tighter in some of the areas, but I just managed to book 2 weeks in Hawaii, and I was using points from Las Vegas timeshare, which has one of the lowest maintenance fees. But you do need to evaluate, if you are with deeds and whatever, to make sure you're comfortable with that trade-off, because if you own the collection, you own all of them. Deeds have a point value and a maintenance fee, so you can use those point values outside of the actual deeded property that you own, and all of the units have point values for booking. I like deeds because I get to pick where the maintenance fee is lowest, and my overall cost therefore is much lower than a collection. So I've actually managed that really well. And in fact, my maintenance costs in Hilton are not that different than Worldmark, and I think the quality of Hilton is greater. It's a little bit of a premium, but not that much of a premium. And I have not had a problem using my deeded points at other locations. Again, I just mentioned that I booked 2 weeks in Hawaii, and actually even got a 3-bedroom for one of the weeks, which was the goal. So again, I was able to do that in the secondary window, as opposed to using my priority at the deeded location. I'm going to talk about my experience owning both now, and again, I sprinkled a little bit of that in throughout that presentation, but I'll be very specific. I own deeds and collections at Hilton, so it's a side-by-side comparison. My deeded maintenance is about, and this is just a ballpark number, about 60 to 70% of my collection maintenance fees. Now that's partially because I own just a little bit of the collection, so there's kind of like a base level you have to pay. Plus, I guess supposedly the more you own, the less that's the case. But it's still, the bottom line is my collection points cost me way more per point on maintenance than my deeded properties. I used to own a deeded Westin deed, and I converted it to collection at Sheraton. I purchased at a lower price per point because they wanted me to convert, so they were giving me a deal. But I switched also from Westin to Sheraton, so my maintenance fees were lower overall. If I had bought the Westin collection, it was kind of a wash at the time of moving over to the collection versus the maintenance, so the maintenance per point were about the same. But the properties in the Westin were actually similar maintenance fees across, so it was a little more simple. So far, no issue with my collection at Westin. I just booked, literally, I just booked Maui for a week, 3 months in advance. And so again, might have been, it was in October, so it's not the middle of summer with the kids, so that, everybody off school, so that might have been more difficult. But I think in general, buying summer vacations in Hawaii are more difficult because a lot of people competing with using that. Anyway, hope this helped. Hope you liked the video, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Hi, this is Cliff, and I'm the Timeshare Traveler. Welcome to my channel. The purpose of my channel is to educate those who love traveling in timeshares. I've been an owner for 15 plus years at timeshare ownership. I have elite ownership with Marriott, Hilton, and Worldmark. I have published over 100 timeshare video reviews, and I've published over 95 timeshare tips. I can be found on Facebook at Timeshare Trav, at Twitter Timeshare Trav, and on the web at www.timesharetraveler.com.